All right, so the next topic in our handbook is agreement. We're going to break it into a couple of different parts. The first part we're talking about is subject and verb agreement. To do that, we're going to take a second just to roll back and look at chapter 2 when we talked about subjects and predicates. You may remember that the subject is a word or a word group that tells whom or what the sentence is about, and the predicate, specifically the simple predicate, is a verb. It's the main word or word group that tells something about the subject. And verbs specifically express action or a state of being. Now, when we talk about subjects and verbs in a sentence, we say that they need to be in agreement. An agreement means that their numbers match. So what is a number? A number is the form a word takes to indicate whether the word is singular or plural. When we first started learning about nouns, we probably learned that the most common way to take a noun from singular to plural is to add an S to the end of it. As you can see in the table on the right, we've done that with the noun pen. Just add an S, it becomes pens. You can do that with dog becoming dogs, cat becoming cats, car becoming cars. The vast majority of our nouns, we add an S to make them plural. We also have some other words like theory, where we drop the Y and we add IES, or words like woman, where we drop the A and add an E. Same for man. Man becomes men, woman becomes women. And then we have some oddball ones like that turn into those when we make them plural. These words, these oddball ones, are the ones you become familiar with the more you read and the more you write and the more you speak. You spot them here and there once you're aware of them, and you just kind of keep an eye out for them when we're talking about agreement. So what is agreement? All right, we've talked about subjects, we've talked about verbs, we've talked about the fact that they can be singular and plural. Verbs can also be singular and plural. An agreement is when we have a subject taking singular or plural form, and then the verb that goes with it takes the same form. So a verb should agree in number with its subject. Singular subjects take singular verbs, and plural subjects take plural verbs. Now, what's important here is when you're talking about a sentence, the main idea is the subject. It's usually what is instigating the creation of the sentence. As a result, our subject dictates the verb. It tells us what the number of the verb is going to be based on what its number is. So what does that mean? We have an example. The dog is upstairs. The sentence is telling us about a dog, singular. It's telling us that the dog is upstairs. Singular subject, singular verb. If we want to talk about multiple dogs being upstairs, dogs becomes plural, our verb becomes plural. So instead of is, we say are. Now, when you're writing this and when you're speaking this, probably more when you're speaking it, it jumps out at you when you have the wrong form of the verb. So if you were to say, the dog are upstairs, it wouldn't feel right. If you were to say, the dogs is upstairs, it doesn't feel right. This is a very basic form of this type of agreement. And at this point, we're probably not making a lot of mistakes along these lines. Here and there, maybe, but not often. Where it does become a problem is when we start talking about phrases and clauses. So one example that we can look at, a gerund phrase, you may remember, is a phrase that acts as a noun, among other things. A gerund phrase or an infinitive phrase used as a complete subject usually takes a singular verb. This is where things can start to get a little bit tricky. Restoring old paintings occupies much of her spare time. Paintings is plural, right? But the gerund phrase takes the singular verb. So restoring old paintings takes the singular verb occupies. The next example is an infinitive phrase. To illustrate books for young readers requires a vivid imagination. Even though that noun readers is part of our infinitive phrase, just like paintings was part of our gerund phrase, the phrase itself takes a singular verb. One of the ways you can kind of get a sense for why, because those phrases are acting as nouns, you can replace them with the pronoun it. And in that case, you have a singular pronoun, which is why your verb is going to be singular. It occupies much of her spare time. It requires a vivid imagination. Now, verb phrases are somewhere where we're also going to run into some issues here and there. Our first example, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, was designed by Maya Leng. Vietnam Veterans Memorial is singular. It's 3 words, it's a compound noun, but it's talking about a single location. Therefore, the helping verb that goes with our action verb designed is also going to be singular. We say was designed. It was designed. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the Civil Rights Memorial were designed by Maya Leng. Here we have 2 subjects together, joined by the conjunction and. They're actually what's called a compound subject. We'll talk about those later. Compound subjects, like this, are plural. There's more than one of them. Therefore, our helping verb will also be plural. Instead of saying the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the Civil Rights Memorial was designed, we say were designed, plural. So those are phrases and clauses that are kind of acting as the subject. We also have what are called intervening phrases and clauses. Intervening phrases and clauses are phrases and clauses that sit between our subject and our verb. The number of the subject is not changed by a word or a phrase, a word in a phrase, or a clause following the subject. So when we have a phrase sitting between our subject and our verb, it does not have any effect on the number of the subject or the number of the verb. What does that mean? Let's look at an example. The short stories are by various contemporary Native American writers. Our subject is short stories. Our verb is are. Both of them are plural. There's no intervening phrase here. Subject right up against verb. If we take that sentence, though, and we add the prepositional phrase in this anthology, we have the short stories in this anthology are by various contemporary Native American writers. In this anthology is an intervening phrase. It sits between our subject and our verb, but no change occurs to the subject. The number of the subject remains plural, and as a result, the verb is plural. Even though anthology is singular, the subject itself is plural. So let's look at an example with clauses. Edmonia Lewis was the first African American woman to achieve renown for her sculpture. Subject, Edmonia Lewis. Verb, was. Both are singular. They're in agreement. Edmonia Lewis, whose subjects included John Brown and Abraham Lincoln, was the first African American woman to achieve renown for her sculpture. The adjective clause is an intervening clause. It sits between our subject and our verb. But it does not change the number of the subject or the verb. Edmonia Lewis is still singular, therefore our verb is still singular. Now you may remember an adjective clause is going to sit in between commas, and in this case it's providing us with some extra information. It's a it is a non-essential clause. Non-essential clauses are subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses, like independent clauses, have their own subject and verb. In that clause, we have the verb included, and we have the subject, subjects. Included is past tense, and we don't have a singular or a plural form of included when we're in the past tense. We only have included. So even though subjects is plural, it's not having any kind of effect on the verb that we can see because there's no other form of it. Instead, we're concentrating on the independent clause. We're concentrating on Edmonia Lewis and the verb was. And again, they're in agreement. They're both singular, so we're happy. Now, tonight's homework assignment, you have a list of sentences where you're asked to identify the subject and then determine which of the 2 provided verbs is correct. You'll get a singular version and you'll get a plural version. On the homework assignment, there are several prompts that are actual audio prompts where we'll talk about the question and you'll have the opportunity to kind of figure out what's going on. Take a look at those, pay close attention, and if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Thank you very much.